And we should mention a point here as well. Another relevant point is that we see, unfortunately, many people, when they call other people to Islam, we see it happening all around us. We see lectures taking place and exhibitions taking place, and we see that often the Muslims will try to impress non-Muslims by showing how great were the Muslims because they made so many advancements in science and technology and this and whatever. And in this way they're trying to impress upon the non-Muslims and use that as a means to invite the people to Islam. This is not the way that this is not what we call them to. This is not what the messengers call the people to. And, leaving aside the fact that most of these so-called scientific discoveries were not made by Muslims, they were actually made by kuffar. They were not made by Muslims. They were made by Sabaeans. They were made by philosophers. Many of these people weren't even Muslim, like Ibn Sina. He wasn't a Muslim. A lot of the architects, if you do your research, you will find that a lot of these people weren't actually Muslim, even though they have Muslim-sounding names, and even though they dressed as like Muslims dress, and even though they lived amongst the Muslims. If you research in all of the names of these people, you find a lot of them were actually Sabaeans. And the Sabaeans were a group of people who were philosophers. Historically speaking, they used to worship the stars, and they were into astrology and so on and so forth. And these were the ones who, through the philosophy, they actually made a lot of the discoveries and a lot of the advancements in science and whatever. They weren't actually Muslims. This is a fact. It's a fact. And you see that the non-Muslims in turn, they will come along and they start ridiculing these Muslims who are trying to use this as a proof to argue for Islam. And they're being ridiculed because they haven't got the facts right, they haven't got the history right, and they're trying to use these names and these people, a lot of them who actually weren't Muslim. There were some Arabs, a small number of Arabs who did have a role, but most of them weren't actually Muslim. They weren't Arabs either. So, see, this shows that when you don't follow the way of the prophets in calling to Allah and inviting people to the deen of Allah, it shows that you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to open up doors for the people to attack Islam. And likewise, the type of Islam that you're going to be calling people to is not the type of Islam that's going to give them a firm rooting. You will see, and we know this from experience, that whenever you give this wishy-washy type of invitation to Islam, the kind of Muslims you produce are those who after a few years they'll fizzle out. They'll have a very, very wishy-washy, very liberal type of approach towards Islam, because the Tawheed and the Iman hasn't really rooted into them. And this is a danger that many, unfortunately, Muslims, they fall into, and they don't call to this Tawheed in the manner that the Prophets call to, in the manner that we see in the Quran, the argument in the Quran, and in the manner that the scholars used to call to. This is a very, very big danger, and we see it happening all around us, and we need to be careful about this. So we see here an example here, the hadith of Mu'adh, a very well-known, famous, important hadith to do with da'wah, that he sent them to the Jews and Christians, and he said, let the first thing be that you invite them to, and yuwahhidu Allah ta'ala, that you inform them that they single out Allah, meaning what? In worship. Not that He's a creator, because the Jews and Christians already accept that He's a creator. It means that they accept that only Allah has a right to be worshipped. So we need to be aware of this, and we need to be aware that there are many, many people, many individuals, many organizations, many groups involved in the call to Islam, but their call to Islam is not based upon the methodology of the prophets and the messengers, and they make mistakes. So we have to be aware of this, and we shouldn't just think that just because someone is out there, spending all of his time, effort, money, and he's calling people to Islam, that his call is necessarily upon the right methodology. In fact, while we're on this topic, I'll quickly give another example of another individual who makes big mistakes in this subject. Is a man called Zakir Naik, who's very famous. He's everywhere. He's on the TV, he's on the satellite, he's everywhere. You can't fail to understand, to come across this man. Now, unfortunately, we have a disease in our times where someone can be a scholar of everything except Islam and the Sunnah and Tawheed, and he's considered to be a scholar of Islam. This man is not a scholar of Islam, he's a scholar of the Bible, and he knows the Bible, he's memorized the Bible. So if you ask him about the Bible, he will rattle off and memorize something that will impress a lot of people. But when it comes to Islam and Tawheed and the Sunnah this man is very, very ignorant. And that there is a very dangerous combination. And to give one example of his ignorance, and in fact there's a whole catalogue of examples. One example is that he claims that what the Hindus worship of the Brahma, the names that they have, Shiva and Vishnu and whatever, that these are the names of Allah. And it is permissible for a Muslim to call upon Allah through these names, because he claims these are the names of Allah. Now, this shows his ignorance on two levels. First of all, from the angle of Islam, we should know that we can't speak about Allah without knowledge. To speak about Allah without knowledge is haram. It is the greatest sin. In fact, it is the greatest sin from which shirk itself springs from. To speak about Allah without knowledge. So firstly, Allah's names are those which He revealed to us and which He taught to us. And it is haram for anybody to claim that such and such is the name of Allah except with a proof. And this shows the danger of ignorance. Secondly, on a second level, if he'd done his research correct, and if he'd done his research, he would understand that these three gods of the Hindus, there's actually three gods, there's Vishnu, Shiva and Brahma, I think, whatever. You will find that in all of the religions of the various civilizations, like the Greeks, and you had the Chaldeans, who were the people of Nimrod, the one who Ibrahim argued with, and you had the Egyptians, that there was a certain type of shirk that happened in those places. And that shirk was the same shirk that then went into Greece, and it went into Rome, and it went amongst the Hindus. And likewise, it's what the Christian religion evolved out of as well. And that shirk is, basically, you have a mythology amongst the Egyptians and the Greeks. And basically you have they have this god, like to give an example with Egypt, they have this god called Osiris, and then there's another female called Isis, and then there's a son that they have which is called Horus. And so he's the son of God, as in the first one is the son of God, S-O-N of God, and then he has a son, he's called the son, the first one is the son of God, S-U-N, the son, and the one who's born, he's called the son, as in the S-O-N of God. So they have these three gods. And we have the same thing in Babylon, and then this mythology moved to Greece, then it went to Rome, and likewise the Hindus have it, and the Hindu version is the Vishnu, Shiva, and the other one. Right? So they've derived the shirk from its roots, which comes from Egypt, and then it went across the civilization. So when you do your research and you go into all the history books, and you look into all the books, you find that this is how the shirk started from these places, then it moved across the civilizations, and then they just simply made their own version of the same event, or the same mythology. So here, this individual who's involved in giving dawah to the people, these are the kind of blunders he's making on the issues of al-asma wa sifat and al-uluhiyya. This is the greatest type of jahl. And so from this we should understand that just because someone, we won't take from him that he's memorized the Bible, but memorizing the Bible does not make you a scholar of Islam or Tawheed or the Sunnah. And we should be aware of this. The second point is that about him is, I think the best way to illustrate it is if I give an example from Islam. If you imagine a Christian came along and he began to take the verses of the Quran, or he began to take verses of the Sunnah and give his own interpretation to them, then we as Muslims would say to him, hold on, wait a minute. This is not the way we interpret the Quran. Rather, we go to Ibn Kathir, and we go to At-Tabari, and we go to the explanation of the Mufassirin, the Tabi'een, like Mujahid and Qatada and Ikrimah and Ibn Abbas and whatever. And so how they explain the Quran, that's how we understand the verse. And similarly, if you take a hadith, and we go to Fathul Bari, we go to likewise the Fathul Bari of Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, we go to Sharh Sahih Muslim of Imam Nawawi, and we go to all the explanations that the scholars have done of Abu Dawood and whatever, and we understand the hadith because this is the orthodox Muslim way of understanding those texts. In the same way, the Christians have absolutely slaughtered this man, because they've said to him, they've used the same argument against him. They've said to him, you are coming along, you're rattling off these verses off the top of your head, and what you're doing is you are totally misinterpreting